My body count is probably higher than everyone else's combined. Look, I didn't do anything wrong. It was just a joke at dinner. I said my body count was probably higher than everyone else's combined. Just teasing. Just trying to make everyone laugh. Everyone chuckled nervously. Except him. He didn't say a word. He just stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out. The next morning, there was a note on the kitchen counter and a letter from his lawyer waiting in the mailbox. Before I get further into the story, I have one small favor. Subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to help this channel share more real stories. It was meant to be funny. We were out with friends at Half Oak, the table littered with drinks and laughter. When I made that joke about my body count, people laughed, but not really. That kind of nervous laugh that dies as soon as it starts. Callum didn't laugh at all. He just stared at me, expression unreadable, and quietly put down his fork. I told him to relax, that it was just a joke. But he didn't answer. The silence made me ramble, teasing that men were way too sensitive these days. Still nothing. When the check came, he stood up, left a few bills on the table, and walked out. Everyone looked at me, stunned. I rolled my eyes and said he couldn't handle a confident woman. At home, he didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He just packed a small bag and said he'd stay at his mother's for a few days. I told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You think it's a joke because it's never you being laughed at." And then he left. The next morning, his coffee mug was gone, and his wedding ring sat on the counter. I laughed at first, but my hand shook as I reached for it. The house felt wrong without him, too neat, too silent. I told myself he was sulking and would return once he cooled off. At work, I recounted the story like it was a comedy. Some laughed politely. One co-worker said her husband would have left too. I shrugged it off, claiming men today couldn't handle honesty. But deep down, I felt a tight knot in my chest. I ignored it. That night, I called him. No answer. Instead, his mother Ellen texted me, asking me to stop contacting him until he was ready. That message made my blood boil. I called my own mother, Ruth, who told me not to apologize for having a sense of humor. She said he'd come back once he realized how ridiculous he sounded. A few days later, I went to the house to grab some paperwork. His office door was half open. On his desk, I saw a neatly printed email chain. His name was beside Grant and Foster, LLP. My stomach dropped. I told myself it couldn't be what it looked like, but I snapped a photo anyway. That night, I messaged him. We needed to talk. Hours later, he replied, "There's nothing left to discuss." I stared at the words until the screen went dark, realizing he might have been serious when he walked out. A week later, a friend invited us both to her birthday dinner. I was certain Callum wouldn't cause a scene, so I agreed to go. When he arrived, calm, polite, perfectly composed, I felt a flicker of triumph. I wanted to remind him what he'd lost. So when the conversation turned playful, I joked again that my experience was probably higher than anyone else's. The table went quiet. Someone coughed. Callum looked at me steadily, then said softly, "That explains a lot." I tried to laugh it off, but no one joined in. I accused him of trying to embarrass me. "You do that well enough on your own," he said. My throat went dry. He stood, reached into his jacket, and placed an envelope beside my plate. "You like being the center of attention," he said. "Here's something worth talking about." Then he left. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were draft divorce papers. The date printed on them was 2 weeks before that dinner, the night of the joke. He had already planned this. Everyone at the table pretended not to notice me. I forced a stiff smile, told myself he'd calm down. But on the drive home, the laughter I'd forced out sounded nothing like mine. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the papers. He had them ready before I even spoke, as if he'd been waiting for a reason. I told myself he wouldn't actually go through with it, that he'd cool off once he saw I was sincere. I texted long messages about love, honesty, and misunderstandings. No reply. One afternoon, I went to the house to pack some things. His study was locked, but I knew the spare key. Inside, everything was arranged too neatly. Folders lined up perfectly, labeled in his clean handwriting. Finances, messages, custody. I opened one folder and froze. Screenshots of my posts, texts, messages from friends about my life before marriage. Another folder had receipts. Bank transfers marked misuse of shared funds. Every page felt like a quiet accusation. I whispered to myself that he'd gone too far. But as I flipped through more, I realized he hadn't rushed this. He'd been building a case meticulously, brick by brick. When he came home later, I confronted him. He told me to lock up when I was done. I asked if he was really doing this. He said simply, "You already did." Then he went upstairs, calm as if nothing had broken at all. 2 weeks later, the mediation took place. I wore a simple navy dress, hoping to look composed. Callum was already there with his lawyer, looking rested, almost peaceful. I smiled politely, expecting him to glance at me. He didn't. The mediator asked if I wanted to speak first. I said yes. I explained the situation had been exaggerated, that it was only a joke gone wrong. I said Callum had turned humor into a crime. His lawyer opened a folder. Inside were pages, screenshots, bank statements, even printed messages between me and Blake from years ago. My stomach sank. I tried to explain. They didn't mean anything. The lawyer said they showed a pattern of public disrespect. Callum stayed silent the entire time. When asked if he had anything to add, he said softly, "I'm just here for closure." I tried to regain control, arguing men can't handle confident women, and that I had never cheated. "No one said you did," he replied. Somehow that hurt more. When the mediator read the summary, it was clear: property and custody awarded to Callum. Immediate separation. My throat tightened. I looked at him, hoping for mercy. He simply nodded, thanked the mediator, then turned to me. "You wanted everyone to laugh. Now they have their ending." He left without waiting for mine. The house felt hollow when I returned. Drawers empty, closets half open. Even the smell of him, clean soap, cedar, was fading. On the kitchen table, a thick envelope with my name. Inside, final papers, stamped and dated. No note, no anger, just a quiet end in black ink. I called my mother. She said she was sorry, but maybe I had gone too far this time. I told her I was just being honest. Humor shouldn't ruin a marriage. She said it wasn't humor. It was cruelty dressed as confidence. I hung up before she could continue. For a while, I walked through the empty house, touching everything he left behind. A chipped mug, a single sock, our son's old drawing on the fridge. The silence hurt more than shouting ever could. I whispered it was just a joke, like saying it again could undo it. But the room didn't answer. That night, I sat in his chair, staring at the space where his computer had been. I thought about how calm he'd been, how quiet. He hadn't tried to destroy me. He just watched me do it myself, piece by piece. I laughed once, shaky. Told myself he'd regret it someday, that he'd miss me. But deep down, I knew the truth. He had moved on from the sound of my voice long before he walked out the door.